welcome back to our kitchen for our second installment of Dutch oven cooking. Now, today we're going to be preparing a recipe that I've made on a couple of different scout trips called Almost Pumpkin Pie. It's basically like a reverse pumpkin pie where instead of having a crust on the bottom and the pumpkin pie filling on top of that, we're going to have the pumpkin pie filling in the bottom and then a crust on top of cake mix. Now, normally I would be making this in my trusty aluminum Dutch oven. 12-inch Dutch oven works really well for this because it heats up pretty quickly, bakes it, and then it cools down pretty quickly because you don't want to eat hot pumpkin pie or almost pumpkin pie. But because of the weather today, it's snowing a little bit and it's pretty darn cold, not a great day for being outside cooking. Also, I thought this would be a great opportunity to talk about how you can take Dutch oven recipes and convert them to cook inside in your oven in other vessels than a Dutch oven, because not everyone has one of these at home. So this can be a good way to, if you see a Dutch oven recipe you want to try on a camping trip, try it at home using this method of adapting a Dutch oven recipe to cook in other vessels. Now in this case, I also want to split this because I could make one whole 12-inch Dutch oven's worth of almost pumpkin pie, but we're not really going to eat all that, at least we shouldn't. So what I'm going to do is, instead of cooking it in here, I'm going to be cooking it in 8x8-inch square cake pans. Now, if you do the math, you calculate out the volume of a 12-inch Dutch oven, or I should say the area, the square inches of the 12-inch Dutch oven, to be approximately 117 square inches. Now, in this case, I have 8-inch square cake pans. 8x8 is 64 square inches, so two of these is, how many? 113, 114? It's enough. And so basically what we're going to do is take the recipe that we would normally cook in one 12-inch Dutch oven, split it between two 8-inch square cake pans. So now that we get that out of the way, we'll come back in a second. We'll talk about what ingredients are going to go into this, and we'll start mixing it up. Hi again. So now we're back. We already talked about how we're adapting this recipe from a Dutch oven to cook in two cake pans. Next, we're going to talk about what we need to put into it. So the filling of this is pretty much standard for a pumpkin pie. Maybe not exactly what your mom uses in her pumpkin pie, but close. So basically we're starting with two 15-ounce cans of pumpkin. Now this has to be pure pumpkin, not pumpkin pie mix. They're very different. Pumpkin pie mix already has sugar, already has spices, and the cake, this dish will not come out correctly if you use pumpkin pie filling. So we're going to use that 100% pure pumpkin. I've got here 3 eggs with 1 teaspoon of vanilla. So I'm just going to dump that in. And actually on camping trips, when I do this in the 12-inch Dutch oven, I just mix it all up in the oven directly. So we've got 3 eggs, vanilla. I've got a cup of sugar. Just dump that in. And then this is half a teaspoon of kosher salt and 1 tablespoon of pumpkin pie spice. Pumpkin pie spice you can buy in big jars like this or different size jars. You can also make your own, because basically pumpkin pie spice is a combination of cinnamon, ginger, and nutmeg. So there are recipes online. If you don't have pumpkin pie spice, you can mix up your own as long as you have those 3 other ingredients. But this will probably last me a couple of years based on how often I make this. So I'm just going to dump that in as well. And then we'll just take a whisk and kind of mash it and start mixing. And we're going to mix this pretty thoroughly. You want to make sure that the sugar is all broken up, the eggs are all mixed in. Everything needs to be very combined here. You really can't overmix this part of it. So it's going to take a minute or two with the whisk. Unlike pancakes, which you can very easily overmix, this mixture you really can't overmix. So I'm just going to keep mixing, and then we'll come back in just a minute to start the assembly process. Okay, in our rush to put the filling together, I realized that I forgot one ingredient. That is 8 ounces or 1 cup of evaporated milk. And the reason I forgot is because I had it set off to the side. So this brings up an important point. When you are mixing together something, when you're preparing something, it's important to have all the ingredients where you're going to be working. So because this, my 1 cup of evaporated milk, was sitting over on the stove, I forgot it. So again, learn from my mistakes. We'll just add this in, mix it up, and then we will come back and put it in our pie pans. All right, welcome back. So now I fixed my mistake, put the milk into the mixture, and divided it evenly between these two 8-inch square cake pans. Also, if you want to do this at home in one pan, you could also use a 12 by 19 inch casserole pan, which is pretty common size. So that approximate volume of a 9 by 13 pan equals 2 cake pans equals a 12-inch Dutch oven. So we've got our filling in there. I also want to make sure that, add that when you're dividing things like this, for example, I also had to divide 1 package of yellow cake mix into 2 equal portions. Use these little plastic containers from when you get Chinese food or wonton soup. They're great for measuring and storing things. Basically what I did is I used my handy dandy kitchen scale to measure and weigh out. I know that a box of cake mix was 15 ounces, so half of that is 7.5 ounces. So this is 7.5 ounces of cake mix. This is 7.5 ounces of cake mix. I did the same thing to make sure that I equally distributed the filling between these two pans. I forget the exact weight that I came up with, but it doesn't matter what the weight is, as long as both pans are equal, you know that they both have an equal amount of filling in them. So now basically the rest of this is very similar to a cobbler that you would make in a Dutch oven. We're going to take our cake mix and just sprinkle it evenly over the top of the filling. Kind of have to sprinkle and then take a spoon and just kind of spread it around. It doesn't have to completely cover, you just want it to be sort of evenly distributed. So if the edges are if you see a little pumpkin around the edges, it's not a big deal. The recipe also originally calls for some chopped pecans in here, or pecans, or whatever you want to call them. We're not doing that, but if you like pecans, by all means, you can add those in. So we'll just sprinkle this around. Again, this is exactly the same way we would do it if we were doing it in a Dutch oven. Put the filling in, spread the cake mix around the top. Now the pie filling, the orange stuff, called for 1 cup of evaporated milk. Now the problem is that evaporated milk comes in a 12 fluid ounce container. So a cup is 8 ounces, so I still have 4 ounces approximately of evaporated milk in here. I could save it and use it for something else. I could dump it down the drain, but that would be wasteful. So what I usually do is, just to make the topping a little bit more moist, I just take what's left of this can, and I know I just said you need to be careful and measure things. I really don't measure this part. I just sort of sprinkle it around so that I've got a little bit of extra liquid going into each one of these, or going into the topping. And again, it doesn't have to be exact, doesn't have to be perfect, you just want it to be somewhat even. And then the last step is, like most cobblers, we're going to take some butter. Now in this case, the recipe calls for 1 cup of butter, which is 2 sticks. And again, to make sure things are equal here and even, I'm using 1 stick per pan, and I've cut each stick of butter into 16 slices. So these are 8 by 8, that's a square. So if I have 16 slices and I want to put them into a square pattern, I can do 4 rows of 4. Makes it really easy for those people who have a little bit of OCD about the math part of it. So I'm going to do that off camera, but just let you know that we're going to basically put those around, make sure they're evenly spaced, and then we will take and put this in the oven. Okay, so we've got our cakes, our almost pumpkin pie ready. We've got the filling in the bottom, we've got the cake on top. I sprinkled the remainder of our evaporated milk on there, and I've got my 16 pats of butter per pan arranged nicely. So I'm happy with this. Now what I'm going to do next is put this into a 350-degree oven for about 45 minutes. It's going to take anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour depending on how efficient your oven is and some other factors. So I'm going to check it at 45 minutes, and if it still looks like it's, basically we're looking for the butter to all be melted, the cake to be golden brown delicious, and if it's not, we'll let it go a little bit longer. So we'll come back when we are ready to check the doneness of our almost pumpkin pie. Okay, welcome back. It's been an hour, and as you can see, the almost pumpkin pies have baked up beautifully. They are what we call golden brown and delicious, or GBD. And right now though, they're very hot, so they need to sit and cool for at least an hour, preferably longer. And if you like it chilled, then throw it in the fridge. I'm just gonna let them sit here on wire rack on the stovetop until they are ready to go. Again, make sure when you're putting things in or working with anything hot, make sure to use oven mitts or gloves like these to protect your hands. So that's it. Thanks for joining us, and enjoy.